Talking Tolkien Podcast, Episode 4, The Silmarillion, Chapter 1, of the Beginning of Days. All right, go ahead. Hi everyone, John Carswell here. Welcome to the Talking Tolkien Podcast, your conversational guide to Middle-earth and the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. On this episode of the podcast, we will be discussing the first chapter of the Silmarillion proper, of the Beginning of Days. We're going to see how the very earliest history of Middle-earth unfolds, what Valinor is, and where the hugely important two trees come from. Enjoy! Okay, let's get this party started. Did I begin that way last time?
Yes, you did. I was just thinking about whether or not I should mention that or not.
Well, party on. Party on. I was kind of thinking, I've been toying with this idea that we're kind of like the Wayne and Garth of Tolkien podcasting. Yeah, party on.
Party on.
You're Wayne, I'm Garth, right?
Yeah. I can dig that as long as there's no spewing involved.
Yeah, well, not yet at least. We'll see what happens by the end of this episode. Remember that time? Remember that time we went for Halloween and you were Wayne and I was Garth?
Oh yeah, that was super fun.
You were a pretty good Wayne.
I was a pretty good Wayne.
I kind of had a hard time pulling off the Garth thing because I couldn't find a good wig, but I did my best. We gotta have a picture of that somewhere.
There was one picture, and this was before cell phones and even before digital cameras, I think. So I don't know that we have an actual copy of it.
It's back before the first age of Middle-earth.
You know what? It could be.
Back before cell phones. All right, welcome to the official podcast of truemyths.org, that is Talking Tolkien. Just FYI, you can follow us on Twitter at Tolkien Wisdom or on Facebook at facebook.com/truemyths. So, Greta, to start things off, I have a question for you.
We're not playing Jeopardy again, are we?
No.
Oh, good.
No, not Jeopardy this time. So, Greta, have you read my book on Beren and Luthien yet?
No.
Oh, awkward.
Just a bit. I read kind of the first draft, though. Because I wrote I read your paper that the book is kind of based off of. But I'm sure the book is even better. Yeah. So I'm putting that on my list.
It's pretty much the best thing ever. Yeah. So I'll be asking next time.
Okay.
I'll be asking every time until you've read the book.
Okay.
Read my book, Tolkien's Requiem, concerning Beren and Luthien.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, so I thought we could do a little, start a little new feature just to begin this podcast, and maybe if this is good enough, we'll continue doing it in most every podcast. But I thought what we do is a little segment called Talking Tolkien. So
hey, as long as it's not Jeopardy, I'm good.
As long as it's not Jeopardy, you're good. So so we're gonna do a little segment called Talking Tolkien. Okay.
Oh, this isn't a pronunciation game, is it?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's
right.
The other thing I would not really be crazy about.
All right. So on Talking Tolkien, we go back and we talk about previous episodes and just review what went on in those episodes, the high points, the low points, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay.
Right?
So it's like a memory game.
No, not really. It's not a memory game. It's just supposed to talk about it, to be able to look back.
We have to remember what we talked about in order to talk about it.
Well, it's all very memorable, though, so that's easy.
Maybe for you.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I know, and I know we've talked about, was I say like a lot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. There was one segment in one of the last few episodes, I think it was in the Anna Lindale episode, where because I have to listen to these when I go back and edit them. A lot of them, like a lot of the parts, I didn't listen to the entire thing. But I listened to a good snippet of it at one point, and it was just like every other word out of my mouth was like, and
you just said like 4 times when you were saying that.
Yeah,
I counted.
There you go. So I say like a lot.
I really don't think people are going to notice. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's something that we all do. It's almost like something that our brain is programmed to just not even recognize.
Like totally.
Yeah. Like for sure.
Yeah, and when we don't, you have to kind of concentrate to not say it.
To not say it.
Even when you don't say like, you end up saying things like kinda.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Right, or
So you just gotta roll with the flow.
That's what I'm talking about.
You just gotta go for it,
I completely
can't worry about
agree.
all those things.
No, you
but still, if it bothers you, hey,
don't
recognize it. Well, you can tell us. That's not what I was going to say. If it bothers you, hey, I understand. Okay, we had to take a little... we had a little technical issue forced upon us there. So I had to take a little break right as we were talking Tolkien. So now we're back, and we just finished up talking about how I say like a lot. And then I also wanted to just briefly touch on the subject of irony.
Okay.
Because I feel like I know what irony is kind of intuitively. Mm-hmm. And we did talk about this a lot in one episode. I can't remember why exactly. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I know what irony is, but I couldn't really give you a book definition of it. I couldn't write out a definition of it.
Sure.
So I called Alanis Morissette.
Good.
And
that's what I was going to suggest.
She's learned a thing or two about the true meaning of irony over the years.
I'm sure she has, yeah.
So I did consult some different things. Looked on the interwebs.
In addition to talking to Alanis.
Mm-hmm. She said, well, it's like rain on your wedding day.
Right.
Yeah. And that just didn't really flesh it out for me. So I looked up some different definitions. A glossary of literary terms, which is this really super, super smart book about just literary terms. You want to know 3 pages about what a metaphor is? You get this book, A Glossary of Literary Terms by M.H. Abrams and Jeffrey Galt Harpham. And that'll tell you a lot. In fact, the entry on irony in there was so long that I was just I just threw up my hands and I was like, too many words.
Too long.
So I just looked it up. I just Googled it, and I kind of put together my own little definition of it based on all the little stuff I saw. And it's kind of this idea of looking stupid when you're really smart for rhetorical effect.
Looking stupid
when you're really smart
for rhetorical effect.
For rhetorical effect. That's still too technical. Basically, it's you're looking stupid. You're playing stupid in order to seem smart, or in order you're playing stupid when you are really smart, so that you can almost lead someone into a recognition of their own stupidity, who thinks that they're smart, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
That in and of itself sounds ironic.
Well, we can't establish that until we have a good definition of it, right?
Well, I guess that's true.
Yeah. Well, okay. And then I wrote this one down. A state of affairs or an event that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects and is often amusing as a result.
Like rain on your wedding day. Nobody expects it to rain on their wedding day because it's supposed to be the happiest day of your life.
But it's supposed to be amusing as a result, right? So that's why in that old pop-up video, people used to be like, see, none of the stuff in this song is actually ironic. It all just is stuff that sucks.
Right. Like a black fly in your Chardonnay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever. But I've always just preferred the simple definition of, it's the way you describe the taste of something like liver, right? Something that's high in iron. Right? It's irony.
It's irony. It's very ironic.
It tastes very ironic. Yes. It seems like that's an appropriate way to define things, and I'm just surprised that I've never heard anybody use irony in that way before.
Like it's tasting like liver?
No, is tasting irony. This tastes irony,
You're surprised you haven't heard people say that before?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It sounds weird.
It does. But just because you're used to thinking of it as like this highfalutin, literary term. All right, that's enough of talking Tolkien. All right, so
now that we all completely understand what irony is,
right.
Why don't we go fix ourselves some liver and onions?
I think it's ironic that irony is, everybody kind of understands what irony is, but it's still hard to define.
Yeah.
I think that in and of
itself is ironic.
Is ironic.
That's true.
Yes.
That is true.
Yes. Very true. All right, so let's get into talking about the Silmarillion. Chapter 1 specifically this time, which is of the beginning of days. Of the beginning of days. So, what'd you think about this chapter, Greta?
It was good.
Yeah, impressions. Yeah, just looking for impressions.
Yeah, impressions. Pretty easy to read.
Yeah.
I feel like things are starting to happen. And it was nice. I felt like I had a much better idea of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because now that we'd spent all that time talking about the characters and the setting and different things, I was able to read through this pretty quickly and pretty much understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Which was cool.
Right on.
Yeah. And I think it also it also set the stage, for even more exciting things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
a lot of stage setting going on in the
Silmarillion. I mean, we're still early.
Mm-hmm.
We're definitely still early. Was it in this chapter? Maybe. Oh yeah, I got excited because I saw the word Silmaril,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, is that where the book gets its title from? The Silmarillion?
Yes.
That's always exciting.
Yeah.
It's like when you're listening to a song and you're trying to figure out why the song is named, what the song is named, and then you hear the lyric
mm-hmm.
that the song is named for, and you're like, oh, yeah. I get it.
Yeah. It's all starting to make sense now.
It's all starting to make sense. It's like when that song Paradise by Coldplay. My favorite song actually is not Paradise, but it's Every Tear is a Waterfall.
Mm-hmm.
But they say Every Tear is a Waterfall in the song Paradise.
Oh, yeah.
And you're
That's
like,
true.
Oh. So anyway, it's like when you start to make those connections, it makes, whether it be music or the book or even a movie, it makes it more enjoyable.
Well, something that helps me make connections in a book that's, and things that are difficult to understand is their maps, right? Being able to visualize something.
Oh, okay.
And there's not a lot of maps with the Silmarillion. There's the one map at the very back. There's actually a map kind of stuck in the middle that nobody really knows about, but it's there. It's another map of Beleriand. It's supposed to be a little more helpful because it lists where different kingdoms are, but it's kind of hard to read.
Mm-hmm.
But a few years ago, I got my hands on this book, this little tome, The Atlas of Middle-earth by Karen Wynne Fonstad, and we'll put a link to this bad boy on the show notes at truemyths.org for this episode. But I'm not going to say this thing is perfect, but it's pretty good. It gives you a lot of maps. The thing I don't like about it is that there's not it's like this kind of weird three-tone thing where it's like they use white, black, and then this weird rusty shade of red. Isn't
that taupe?
Maybe that's taupe.
It looks taupe.
I don't know. I'm not up on my color names.
Yeah, it's not very colorful, is it?
Yeah, but it is still helpful, and it it's nice because especially early on, it gives you kind of a good layout of where everything is, and I'm pretty sure. I don't know that she worked with Christopher Tolkien or anything on this, but I think she had access to a whole bunch of notes and that sort of thing, when she was putting it together. So, I think she has it pretty spot on with this book. But it does help establishing what was going on, what things looked like here in the early days of Middle-earth. I do recommend this book if you just want to get a good lay of the land, and it's pretty cool because as you get into the second and third age, the maps start to get a lot more detailed, And you can basically like almost read. You could go through and like read the whole story of the Lord of the Rings just from this atlas alone. Which is kind of cool. Obviously there's a lot of stuff left out, but still you just get this good picture. She really tries to be accurate on how things are laid out. So I mentioned that because we start to learn a little bit about the lay of the land early on of the beginning of days. It is told among the wise that the first war began before Arda was full shaped, and ere yet there was anything that grew or walked upon earth, and for long Melkor had the upper hand. All right, so a very ominous opening to the Silmarillion proper. And remember, even though this is the 4th podcast, and even though we're like 50 pages into the book at this point, this is technically chapter 1 of the Silmarillion, because the Ainur and Quenta are like separate works, considered separate works from this, even though they're all in the book, the Silmarillion. Yep. But if you look one page before chapter 1, it says Quenta Silmarillion, the history of the Silmarils. Right. Yes. Okay, so chapter 1 of the beginning of days. We're talking about this first war before Arda was even full shaped, right?
Yes.
So the people, the Valar and the Maiar, they descend into Middle Earth. Mm-hmm. It's kind of shapeless at this point. All they know is what they saw in the vision that came from the music, and they want to realize and they want to prepare this world for the coming of the children of Ilúvatar.
Right.
All right.
Yes.
But Melkor comes along, and he wants to spoil everything they're doing.
Of course.
He wants to dominate.
Yep.
And so it says that Melkor has the other hand, and then of course what happens there?
The upper hand.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said other.
The other hand.
I know what you're.
He has the other hand, whatever that is.
Whatever that is. Little did we know.
Sounds bad.
There was an upper and an other hand.
That's right. He has the upper and the other. All right.
He was right.
That's right.
And wrong.
He was right and wrong. Oh man.
Okay.
That's a guy we need to interview on the Talking Tolkien podcast one of these days.
We could only be so lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what happens? Well, good old Tulkas comes to the rescue, right?
That's right.
Tulkas the Strong. Was he called that earlier?
Tulkas the Strong?
Was he called, was the Strong part of his name before? Because I remember reading that and being like, ooh.
The Strong?
The Strong.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if they gave him that surname in Val Quenta.
Yeah.
But he sure did sound strong, the Val Quenta.
He sounded very strong. That almost seems like it's not really doing him justice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It should be like Tulkas. I don't even know.
It says he wasn't even there actually at first when Melkor came into the world, and Melkor started messing things up. And
right.
So came Tulkas the Strong, whose anger passes like a mighty wind, scattering cloud and darkness before it. And Melkor fled before his wrath and his laughter, and forsook Arda, and there was peace for a long age.
Yep.
So his wrath and his laughter, I kind of like that.
I like that too.
Again, Tulkas, not the one you go to for counsel, I think, as they put it, but
but he's a hardy friend.
But he's a hardy friend, and he scares Melkor away,
mm-hmm.
right? So he's got to be a pretty bad dude.
Yeah.
So good on Tulkas. Melkor leaves, goes and broods in the outer darkness, and then they erect these lamps. They build these lamps.
Yeah, these lamps.
Yeah. Yavanna is the maker of the lamps. And what do you think about these lamps? I mean, obviously, we've got one at the north end of the world and one at the south end of the world, and they give full day, right? It's always day with these lamps. Always day. Yeah. Okay. Which sounds really cool. Sounds really very peaceful, and everybody's hanging out where? Do you remember?
There's a feast, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what they're doing. They Melkor leaves, and then I guess they continue building, and things kind of quiet down, and they're like, man, we made a pretty nice place, and they go and hang out on this place, the Isle of Almaren.
Oh, right, yes.
And it's kind of this little paradise in the middle of paradise.
The first dwelling of the Valar.
The first dwelling of the Valar, that's right.
Yep.
But Melkor's kind of keeping an eye on things. And he doesn't like what he sees because people are happy.
Right.
And that makes him mad.
Yep.
When other people are happy, it makes him mad.
It actually says he's jealous.
Yeah.
There he goes, coveting again.
Yes, that's right. Far off in the darkness, he was filled with hatred, being jealous of the work of his peers, whom he desired to make subject to himself. Always wanting to make him subject to himself.
Yep, domination.
That's right. That's a hard urge to resist sometimes,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just in different ways. I mean, and a lot of, for most people it's more subtle. Not everybody's like, wakes up in the morning and is like, man, I really want to go out and dominate some people today. But, it's a much more subtle sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
You're like, I kind of want to rise to the top, and I want people to listen to me and do the things that I say. And if they don't do it, I'm going to be mad and punch them in the face. Right. And that's where it starts to go wrong.
Yeah, that's where it starts to go wrong. It's that whole control freak thing.
Right.
But taken to the next level. I think it's okay to be a control freak in certain things, but when you let it get out of control, that's when it becomes a problem.
Well, but I think it's the freak part that's the problem, right?
Well, that's probably true.
It's okay to want control in some things, maybe, but to be a total control, to be a control freak entails that you're taking it to
that's
completely
true.
To an extreme, and it's getting out of hand.
That's true. It's the freak part we need to be worried about, not the control. Yeah,
I've never heard any. I could never imagine telling somebody being like, you're just the right amount of control freak. I have a feeling that would be taken the wrong way by just about anybody.
There's no right level of freakness and control.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's true, because when you call somebody a control freak, it's definitely not meant to be a compliment, is it?
No. Definitely not. Definitely not. Remember, what's the occasion of this feast that the Valar have?
A wedding, right?
Yeah.
So Tulkas and Nessa.
That's right.
Are married, or getting married, or have been married.
Tulkas and Nessa. That's right. Nessa is the sister of Orome, right? And she's the dancer, right?
The one that loves deers.
That's right. The one that loves deer.
Wait. You don't say deers, do you?
Deer.
You just say deer.
One of those deer. She's dancing.
Yep.
Dancing like a deer. Everybody's hanging out, enjoying themselves. And all the time Melkor is plotting. Yep. He's built himself a new Fortress of Solitude. Utumno.
Yes.
And all the while he's been sort of planting seeds among some of the Maiar and bringing some people over to his side.
Yep, building his little army.
And then he says, you know what? I don't like those lamps. He says, I'm going to go knock down those lamps. Well, he does.
Really, Melkor, really? Lamps.
What?
Lamps. Like, really? He couldn't deal with the lamps.
Well, it's all the light.
That's probably true, because he likes the dark.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
It's just funny. You think about taking your anger out on lamps.
Well, these are more than, we're not talking about...
That's true, lamps is an understatement.
We're not talking about your grandma's lamp in her living room here.
That's right.
We're talking about some pretty mighty lamps.
We're talking about basically the lights of the world is
That's
what
right.
we're talking about.
That's right. I've seen some artist rendering of these. I don't know if I have one on my blog, but I've seen a few artist renderings of these, and you really have to get it. These are gigantic lamps that rise above everything in the world and light the world, right?
Right, yeah.
And can be seen from anywhere in the world. So these are pretty serious lamps.
It's like if you put the sun and the moon on a stand.
Yeah. Well, basically, if you put the sun at one end of the world and another sun at the other end of the world, and then, there you go.
Yeah.
And so you can understand why, when he knocks them over, it causes some pretty major havoc.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He assails the lights of Valinor and Ormal.
Wait, I think we need to first back up a minute.
Okay.
And talk about why he was even able to be successful at this. Why was he even able? because he had been defeated once. Mm-hmm. Yes. He was able to do this because somebody fell asleep.
Tulkas was taking a nap.
Tulkas drank too much wine at his wedding feast. Man. He ate a little too much turkey.
Did it say he drank too much wine?
No.
Okay. So you're just making that up?
I'm making that up. I'm talking about wine and tryptophan because I'm just assuming that's what made him sleepy.
Yeah.
So this is when Tulkas slept, being weary and content.
Maybe he was laughing too hard.
He may have been laughing too hard.
That can make you tired.
That can make you tired.
They say smiling burns more calories than frowning. Yeah.
They do.
Yes, that's what
they say. I think it's true, too. Yeah. So that's the whole reason that Melkor was even able to knock down the lamps, is because somebody fell asleep on the job.
That's right.
So darn you,
I'm not saying who, but
Tulkas.
Anyway. And, he just, even after, the lamps fell down and marred the entire landscape and everybody was, frowning, he was like, oh, sorry, guys. It happens, And everybody was okay with it because it was Tulkas, and it was like, Tulkas, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He's one of those people that you just can't stay mad at,
hey,
as much as you want to.
Go chase Melkor. Go get Melkor. Tulkas is like, right on. Goes after him.
Right. Yeah, he does.
But unfortunately, Melkor escapes. So he knocks over the lamps, and it says, in the shape of Arda, the world, and the symmetry of its waters and its lands were marred in that time, so that the first designs of the Valar were never after restored. Now, if you have the Atlas of Middle-earth, you can see in there that basically, in this early age, when the lamps were there, it was basically just, it wasn't like continents and everything. It was just this big world, right? It was basically just this big landmass surrounded by waters.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And there you have the Isle of Almaren there.
Okay. Yeah, and the Great Lake.
And then that's where Melkor built Utumno way up in the north. Okay. And then he destroys the lamps, and then that's when you start having all these mountains spring up, and then you have in the far west is what we're going to talk about. In the next section, we have this new land built up where Valinor is going to be, and then you have the Middle Earth, or Endor, right here in the middle, and that's where Middle Earth is eventually going to be. Although there's still some kind of continental formation that's going to take place, and then you have somewhere way over in the east that we don't really even know anything about.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So Middle Earth came as a result of Melkor knocking over the lamps. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It reminds us of how, obviously that seems like a bad thing for Melkor to knock over the lamps.
Right.
Right? But Middle Earth is obviously where hobbits come from. And could very well show us what we talked about earlier, about how Ilúvatar told Melkor, yeah, you may try to go against me and mess up my themes and whatever, but I'm going to make something even better out of what you try to destroy. So the lamp thing, by the lamps being knocked over and having Middle Earth come out of that could be a way that Ilúvatar was using that seemingly evil to make something good and beautiful.
Yeah, well, good way to revisit one of the early themes. That is a major theme that even though Melkor is doing his things and trying to weave his themes into the music, his own self-devised themes into the music of the Ainur, he thinks it all comes from him. He wants to do something original. Ilúvatar is like, no matter what you do, it will play back into my ultimate plan, and into my music, right?
And I'm going to do something awesome with it.
That's right. I'll do something. I'll make something even better because of it, right?
But of course, all the Valar are very sad about this because they can't, they can't see that this is going to become something wonderful and beautiful.
Right.
Right? All they know is that their lamps have been destroyed and their paradise, as they know it, is essentially gone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, the Valar have reason to despair, perhaps.
They do.
Although we'll see in the next section they don't. We need to pause there. Any more before we go to commercial? Any more thoughts on this section before we take a break and then move into the next couple of sections?
No. I think we covered it pretty well.
Good observations, and We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. Don't go away. Do you know the tale that Tolkien called the kernel of the Middle-earth mythology? Beren and Luthien is the story of an outlaw mortal and an elvish princess tasked with obtaining a Silmaril, one of the holy jewels of the Blessed Realm, from the Iron Crown of the Dark Lord Morgoth. In my new book, Tolkien's Requiem, I explore the legend of these doomed lovers. In doing so, I aim to provide a backdoor into the world of the Silmarillion for those who have struggled to give it a go. One of Tolkien's greatest achievements, the story of Beren and Luthien, deserves to be as well known as The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Get your copy of Tolkien's Requiem today by visiting truemyths.org/Beren. That's truemyths.org/BEREN. Happy reading! Okay, welcome back after that commercial break. We're picking up. We have just looked at the first part of Chapter 1, the beginning of days. The two lamps have been thrown down. The Valar are all very bummed about this. Melkor has kind of escaped back to his fortress, Utumno. Tulkas was not able to nab him, and so everybody is very bummed out about this. And it says, "Thus ended the Spring of Arda." Right. Mm-hmm. So springtime, we think of springtime as this time of newness and everything, and there we go. Melkor came along and ruined it all for everybody. No more hanging out on the island, carefree.
Nope.
No more island living there.
That's right.
Time to get back about doing things. So we looked at that map, from the Atlas of Middle Earth, and it showed how it had been one big continent before, and now it's kind of divided up into the far west, Middle Earth, which is in the middle. That's why they call it Middle Earth. And then there's this place in the far east we don't know anything about.
Right.
The far west is where the Valar are now, and this is where they're going to build their new home. All right, and they call that home. Do you know? Pick up on this?
Pelori or
no? There's a lot of names thrown out in here. So here's what we're gonna do. So the land is called the land of Aman.
Aman, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
The westernmost of all lands upon the borders of the world. And then you've got basically to the west of that. If you keep going west in the land of Aman, you get to the Walls of Night, right? So it's basically like you can't, if you think about this like the Truman Show, right? You got this big like enclosed dome. That's kind of what this world is like, except obviously much, much larger than the little place that Truman was living there. But there's this edge you get to, and you can't go beyond it. There only a few people can have the keys to go beyond the Walls of Night, right?
Yeah.
And so, in the land of Aman, in this far west place, you have these. They raised up the Pelori, the mountains of Aman, and they were supposed to be kind of like a fortification for their central home. Okay.
So the Pelori are mountains.
The Pelori are a specific mountain range
in
Aman.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
The highest of the mountains of the Pelori was Tanaquetil, and that's where Manwë had his throne.
Okay.
And Manwë and Varda, they'd sit up there and they'd look out upon everything.
Right.
Trying, seeking to kind of guard the world and guide the world from there. The new home they established for themselves within the Pelori, right behind the walls of the Pelori, is called Valinor.
Okay.
That's going to be a very famous name. Valinor is the Blessed Realm, right?
Gotcha.
That's their new attempt to create a blessed realm, a paradise in Arda, right?
So it's like their new. It's basically the new version of their island.
Yeah.
That was destroyed.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
Before, though, they were, it was just this island right out there in the middle of everything. Now they've got the Pelori surrounding this place, right? The mountains surrounding this place.
Yes, okay.
And it was blessed, for the deathless dwelt there. And they're not faded nor withered. Neither was there any stain upon flower or leaf in that land, nor any corruption or sickness in anything that lived. For the very stones and waters were hallowed.
Sounds pretty nice.
Yeah, sounds like a place you'd want to live.
Absolutely.
All right, so then you've got Valmar. Valmar is the place of many bells. Then this is the city, right?
Valmar is a city in
the city of Valinor. Yeah,
okay.
I think of Valinor as kind of the country. Valmar, it kind of reminds me of how I kind of think of Switzerland in a way. Like Switzerland is like this mountain country, and you think of it as being neutral and like nobody ever invades it and everything like that. It's kind of like this little haven, and like they don't. Like you have to, if you want to be naturalized into Switzerland, I think you have to actually marry a Swiss citizen.
Or you have to be born there.
Yeah. So
and it's very clean and pristine.
Exactly. So that's almost kind of the idea here. But Valmar is the city of Valinor, and then behind that, this is where things start getting really important. Because I get Valinor and Valmar mixed up. I'm like, what is Valmar again? Valinor is the Blessed Realm. Valmar is the city. And then Ezalohar is this green mound, right? Like this green hill, right? That is like kind of on the outskirts of Valmar.
Okay.
Right? And so something really important happens here. Yavanna and Nienna get together, and Yavanna is, she's upset because the the lamps have been cast down. Right.
Yep.
And she devises these new things. Right. She goes and she hallows this mound of Ezalohar, and she sang a song of power, and in her and in it was all her thought of things that grow in the earth. And then Nienna. Do you remember what Nienna does? What's Nienna's superpower?
Nienna's the Isn't she the mourner?
Yes, Nienna is the mourner. And if you'll remember, Nienna brings wisdom from sorrow, right?
Yes.
So you think about this. You think about that. She mourned when the two lamps were thrown down, right? I'm sorry. Everybody would have been mourning when the two lamps were thrown down, right? And the land is marred. All this hard work they did is all messed up.
Yep.
And so Nienna hears Yavanna's song and mourns because of this. And then basically from Yavanna's song and her hallowing of this mound, and then from Nienna's tears, we get the two trees.
Yep.
Right?
The Two Trees of Valinor.
The Two Trees of Valinor, the all-important Two Trees of Valinor. So the two trees are not things under the two. So tell me what you were able to gather about the two trees from reading.
Well, from reading, I was able to gather that one was silver and one was gold.
Right.
And that they both dropped, they seem to have like rain coming off of them.
Right.
They have names. Let's see, the silver one is Telperion, yeah. Telperion. And the gold one is Laurelin.
That's right.
And what I thought was really interesting, I didn't realize this right at the beginning, but it seems like Telperion, the silver one, is referred to as he. It's a male tree. And then Laurelin is referred to, which is the gold one, is referred to as a she.
Right.
A female tree. And they basically take turns shining.
Yeah.
Right? They each are on for like 7 hours, and for when one starts to fade in the 6th hour, the other one starts to light up. So there's this 1 hour where they're both, one's kind of declining and one is increasing.
That's right. Yeah, there's this kind of overlap with them.
For that 1 hour. But then for the other 6 hours, one of them is more dominant than the other. Yeah,
there's a heck of a lot of, I think, foreshadowing and symbolism that goes on here. And, one of the things that I wrote about a little bit in my Beren and Luthien book was that I feel like Telperion and Laurelin. Again, we're not talking allegory here, but just because Tolkien didn't like allegory does not mean that he wouldn't have seen symbolism in different places. And I think there's some pretty heavy symbolism going on here with Telperion and Laurelin and like elves and men, right? Because as we're going to see later on, the elves are like the people of the moonlight, and men are the people of the sun. In fact, elves awaken with the moon, right? Because of the moon underneath the stars, right?
Okay.
Actually, I don't think you can say they awaken with the moon. I guess they awaken underneath the stars. But so, like, the moon is obviously at night, so those two things go hand in hand. But you've got it's silver light they awaken in, basically, right? So silver.
Okay.
Men awaken with the sun, right? Men eventually awaken when the sun comes, and so that's the golden light. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
And so, and you've got this kind of mingling light between them as well. There's going to be just a few couples from each race, right? Where there's a man maybe who's what we have an elf, a she elf, and then a man. End up becoming lovers, right? And produce offspring. Right. And that's going to happen just a few times in the history of Middle Earth, but they're all going to be very significant events when that happens.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but the other thing you've got going on here is that the count of time begins.
Yes.
Right? Before you had this endless day with the lamps always lighting the landscape. But now, because there's the changing light, you basically got a set amount of hours each day because of the waxing and waning of the two trees, right? You've got the count of time beginning, and that's really where the first age kicks in. And
thus begin the days of the bliss of Valinor and the count of time.
Right, and so there's, it's not the Spring of Arda anymore, but there is a bliss in Valinor, right? There's still happiness in Valinor,
right?
Especially because Melkor hasn't caused any trouble in a long time. And again, out of the sorrow comes a new joy. Right?
Two trees.
Out of the sorrow comes a new joy, and the two trees are beautiful.
Yes, they are. It's interesting that it says each day of Valar, and each day of the Valar in Aman. Is it Aman?
Yes.
Contain 12 hours, which obviously different half of our 24-hour.
Right.
And I was thinking that's a really short day. But
well, but 12 hours is half a day. I haven't thought through how that would work necessarily.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just this notion of like there was always some light, and so 12 hours is just half of 24 hours. I don't know. That's hard.
No, it just struck me that it was 12. But what else I thought was interesting about the two trees is how they gave more than just light to the earth. They actually nourished the rain from the rain that fell, nourished the ground, and it says that the rain that fell from the trees was as wells of water and of light. So
right.
it gives you an idea of, you think of how, plants need sunlight to grow, that these trees had a very nourishing effect on the earth.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just that it, provided light for them to, to be able to see where they were going, but it actually, it actually nourished the earth in different ways. It nourished Arda.
Well, and too with Yavanna and Nienna making this together, you see these patterns, like this repeating pattern of, Yavanna sings these things into being basically, and then it's Nienna's tears, kind of a response to the events, but also to Yavanna's song that gives it being, and you have the music of the Ainur, in miniature right there, giving some new creation, some new beautiful thing, out of that. So we're that pattern repeats constantly throughout.
Joy coming out of sorrow,
right? And and
new life,
and creation for new joy coming out of music, too. Right?
Yes, the Song of Power.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So we have the bliss of Valinor, the days of the bliss of Valinor. The two trees are there. They're beautiful. Everyone is drawn to them. Everyone loves them. And we get a little rundown in the next section about the three big Valar and who they are related to in terms of the children of Ilúvatar, who haven't officially shown up on the scene in terms of the story yet. Right. But we're going to learn a little bit about them here. So you remember when I think in the first episode, we talked about the chart in the back?
Yes.
Of the different Quendi, the elves. And you have, if you look at the Eldar there, do you have it pulled up?
Not quite.
It's before that.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, got it.
All right, so, yeah, right. You have it right there, the bottom one.
Yep.
So the Eldar, and they're divided into the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. The Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. So those are the three groups that we see mentioned here with the three big Valar, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, you have Aule and the Noldor. Aule is the maker. He's the guy that loves to make things from the earth.
The craftsman.
Exactly. And he is most like the Noldor.
Right.
And it says, the Noldor also it was who first achieved the making of gems. And the fairest of all gems were the Silmarils, and they are lost.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we're going with all this.
Yep.
We're going to find out how all that takes place. Manwë is the he is, remember, the Lord of the Air, right? The Lord of the Skies.
Right.
And he is most like the Vanyar because they are people of poetry and of song. You think of that like poetry and song being these things of the air because they're about the words we breathe out, the words we speak out.
Okay.
So he feels a kinship with the Vanyar.
Right.
And then the Teleri are people of the sea.
Right.
And so they feel the most kinship with Ulmo, and vice versa.
Yep.
The Teleri learned much of Ulmo, and for this reason their music has both sadness and enchantment. Right. And again, as someone who loves the sea, I can appreciate that, the sadness and enchantment of the sea.
Yeah.
So that's just a quick rundown of those three big Valar, and then a little short introduction to the different children of to the different Quendi, the different elves that we're going to see being major factors in Valinor.
Yep.
In a few chapters. And then at the end of that section, you've got a little blurb on Yavanna and Orome. Now, Orome, do you remember what he does?
Yes. Orome is the... What do I have written down? A mighty lord. Less... I can't read my writing. Oh, less fun version of Tulkas. That's what I have written in my notes.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it says in the book, right? Less fun version of Tulkas.
Less fun version of Tulkas. Yes. I can't remember exactly what his job is, though.
He's the tamer of beasts, and he rides the horse, right, around the lands.
Oh, the white horse, yeah.
And so during this time, like the Valar are all kind of tucking themselves behind the Pelori, and they're just like huddling in there, just trying to enjoy. And like there's this wide world, and it's Orome and Yavanna who are looking at this, and they're like, this is messed up, right? Melkor is out there.
We should do something about it.
Yeah, Melkor is out there, like, up to his things, up to his old tricks, and here we are, huddled into our little fortress. Right? So Orome likes to go riding in the countryside, and he likes to blow his horn and scare all the bad things away.
Right.
And he would go out and hunt the evil creatures that Melkor was starting to make and spread out throughout the world.
Right.
And then Yavanna cares about this because she cares about growing things, right? She cares about all the things that are growing in the countryside. Those are the creatures of her thought. So
right. Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting how it was Yavanna was the one that it says she would ever urge the Valar to that war with his evil dominion. that they must surely wage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you wouldn't expect. I was just surprised by that because I didn't expect one of the, Valier, the female.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect one of the queens to be like, guys, come on, we gotta go fight this dude.
Yeah, well,
I expected that to be like Tulkas, or Manwë being like, all right, let's go fight.
Yeah.
Instead, it's Yavanna being like, guys, we really need to do something about this.
Yeah.
Struck me as
Well, no, it is. But when you understand what her love is for and what her allegiance is to,
mm-hmm.
you understand why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On one hand, Ulmo is all about the seas, and so Melkor hates the seas, and he's not worried. It's almost like he's just given up on the seas because he knows he can't control them.
Right.
Yavanna, but the land, and the skies too. There's not much he can control there, but the land is really what he wants to control, what Melkor wants to control.
Right.
And so, Yavanna and Orome are the ones that, that would care about those things because Orome loves to ride and Yavanna loves the creatures of the land.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, and then, and so last section in this chapter,
mm-hmm.
Talks about the differences between elves and men. So we learn a little bit more about elves, the children of Ilúvatar, elves and men.
Yep.
Elves, their proper name is the Quendi.
Mm-hmm.
And then men, their proper name is Atani. All right.
Okay.
The elves are the greatest and the most like the Valar.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Men, they're a little bit mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
And the Valar certainly think they're a little bit mysterious too. Anything about this section strike you as funny or weird or noteworthy?
I thought it was interesting that it says, the Ilúvatar made the elves more like in nature to the Ainur,
mm-hmm.
whereas to men he gave strange gifts.
Right,
like,
strange gifts.
Strange gifts.
Like
what am I thinking?
death.
Like death. Exactly.
Right.
Yes, like death. I thought that was. I thought that was interesting that death was described as a gift.
Yeah.
But then when you read it and it talks about when you realize when it describes the elves and how they remain until the end of days, you think about, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Like if I could be immortal and live forever, that should be the gift, right? But then you realize that it says here, and as the years lengthen, ever more sorrowful.
Yeah.
And so then that's when you begin to think, oh yeah, death really is a gift in that sense.
Well, and you think about the Lord of the Rings, and this is thousands and thousands of years later, and here mm-hmm. there are all these elves who are in Middle Earth,
mm-hmm.
and they just talk about they just all seem like very weary. And
mm-hmm.
mm-hmm. they're just getting over it.
They're worn out.
Yeah, and
they just want to go to sleep forever.
Yeah, but they can't.
Right.
They're immortal
right.
unless they're killed.
Right.
So either they walk up, but they have a moral duty. They can't just be like, well, I'm just going to commit suicide. Right. They have a moral duty not to do that. Mm-hmm. Right. To mm-hmm. live the role that's been assigned to them.
Right.
Many will die. Many of the elves will die, but in battle or something like that. Right.
Yes. Yes.
They don't die a natural death. Men, however, do die a natural death. Mm-hmm. I also found it really interesting that one other note on that too. Remember back in the first episode we talked about the themes that Tolkien mentions in his introduction. Mm-hmm. And one of them, of course, is mortality, right?
Yes.
That this work is almost an exploration of mortality and mm-hmm. what it means to die.
Right.
And on the flip side, the elves are supposed to give us a picture of like why death might, in some sense, be a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. Could in some sense be thought of as a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. There's a lot of reflection that could be done on that subject. Mm-hmm. Way more than we would have time for right now.
Yes.
But that's one of the major themes here, and something that partly a reason that Tolkien goes so in depth with elves and men is to flesh out the consequences of being immortal versus being mortal.
Yeah.
And we'll see that further developed later on.
Okay.
another thing that I found really interesting is that Melkor it says that men in the minds of the Ainur most resemble Melkor.
Yeah,
right.
I read that and I was incredibly insulted.
You were offended.
I was like, what? Come on, really, Melkor?
Well, why do you think that is?
Free will.
Free will.
Free will.
Do you care to elaborate?
That's the first thing that popped into my head, but I guess what I mean by that is that's really what that's really what makes Melkor a bad guy, right? Is he just wants to do his own thing, and he wants to go against Ilúvatar, and we as men or women have been given free will, and we can choose to use that for good or for evil. And it's when we use that for evil that obviously bad things begin to happen. So maybe, I don't know. Now that I'm talking about it, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't get, he doesn't get real explicit about why that is. I think it's maybe just because men are more mysterious to the Ainur, right? Elves are like the Ainur in a lot of ways. They're immortal. Okay. They're very, they have this like high nobility about them, right? And so they're more understandable. They're more relatable in that way. Men, however, are this unknown quantity because they live such short lives, and so they're almost unpredictable. They're a little more. This is just me talking. This is just me thinking about it. I'm not necessarily supporting this from the text. It's just me thinking about it, right? Men are
maybe they're a little bit more like loose cannons.
Yeah. That's the idea. And men have a shorter time, and therefore they want to make their mark, kind of like Melkor, right? Melkor, not because he has a shorter time, but he wants to make his mark really bad. Well, men want to make their mark, right?
Leave a legacy.
And so they're not as patient, right? They want to do things. They're more rash about getting things done.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's a good thought.
Yeah, so
I thought that was interesting too, where it says that the men die indeed, and therefore are called the guests or the strangers.
Yes,
and that speaks too to that whole idea of mystery, right? That they're essentially strangers in this land, something that you don't know a whole lot about. They're just kind of here to hang out for a little while and do their thing, and then they're gone.
Yeah, and the other thing is no one knows what the fate of men is after death, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, it says that they will join.
Elves, if they die, go to the halls of Mondos, right? So the Valar know about that.
Yes.
No one knows what happens to men when they die.
Well, it says at the end that the Valar declare to the elves that men shall join in the second music of the Ainur. Yeah,
but that's first of all, that's old, like that. So that's basically saying like there's an old saying that they will, but that's about all they know, right?
Okay.
And what I find really interesting is just before that, death is their fate, the gift of Ilúvatar, which as time wears, even the power shall envy. But Melkor has cast his shadow upon it, and confounded it with darkness, and brought forth evil out of good, and fear out of hope. Right? So there's almost this sense that death was supposed to be this good and joyful and very acceptable thing. But Melkor has so clouded it. Right? So that's what I do with that. Of old, the Valar used to say this, but we're not really so sure anymore that that's really true, right? Because Melkor has done so much to make this look like a horrible thing.
Right.
Right?
Oh, okay.
Melkor has cast his shadow upon it and confounded it with darkness and brought forth evil out of good and fear out of hope. Right?
Yep.
That's how Melkor rolls. That's what he does.
Yeah. Not a very nice dude.
And so, whereas Ilúvatar has not revealed what he purposes for the elves after the world's end, and Melkor has not discovered it. But yeah, they talk about the second music of the Ainur being the thing that is at the end of all things. So,
right. But you're saying that's almost more like a a legend or something. Like, it's nothing.
I mean, it just feels like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there, definitely, and we have it there, but it feels like if I was a man or an elf living in the First Age, that would have been like this distant rumor. Like, the Valar, some say the Valar hold that men will take part in the second music, but we're not even really sure what that means. And what we do know is that dying stinks. Right?
Yeah.
So,
okay.
It's almost like something that they would have to accept on a very, very strong faith in order, to recover the view of death that they should have. Is what I'm taking away from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, so any other thoughts on Chapter 1? Any other things stand out to you that we didn't get to?
I don't think so. I feel like the chapter ends kind of on a hopeful note, don't you think? Because Melkor has not discovered it, right? So there's still
the fate of elves.
Yeah, like there's still, I think that's hopeful.
Yeah.
Because, what he doesn't know, he can't destroy. Hopefully. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. There's definitely some hope there. Melkor doesn't know everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, next time we're going to... I think that about does it for Chapter 1. Next time we're going to take a look at Chapter 2 of Aule and Yavanna. A little bit shorter chapter there, but lots of good stuff going on in there. So, hope you'll tune in then. And head on over, if you've been enjoying this podcast so far, head on over to wherever you're listening to it from and give us a rating. Hopefully it's a good rating, but give us whatever rating you feel like is appropriate. I'd love to hear your feedback. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye, y'all.
Till then, from the Wayne and Garth of Tolkien Podcasting, party on.
Party on, dude.
Party on. Please remember to check out truemyths.org for show notes as well as other Tolkien goodness. Next time we will be discussing Chapter 2 of the Silmarillion, of Aule and Yavanna, wherein we learn a great deal about the origin of dwarves, eagles, and ents. That's it for now. Thanks for listening.